What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. As always, we're going to be diving into the 2024 class on here and just kind of getting into it. So if you missed the 24-24 running back class episode, I dropped that last week. Now we're going to be talking about the 2024 wide receiver class and where they rank, my top 5 at the position, players you should be watching, and I'm going to be giving you guys my favorite sleeper of this class, a guy that's being completely undervalued by Devy managers, college football players out there, and people that you need to really be watching, and a kid that I think you should be drafting everywhere. So stay tuned after the intro. All right, like I said, we're going to be talking about wide receivers, and we got to talk about this guy first. So Marvin Harrison Jr. comes in at number 1. I think that if you're talking about him being anything but number 1, I think that's a mistake. I think he'd probably been the number 1 receiver in the class this year. He's a top 10 pick going into next year, and he's going to be a phenomenal athlete. You see the numbers on the board and what he did: 13 games, 77 receptions, 1,200 yards. Yards per reception, 16.4, and then 14 touchdowns. Had he not gotten injured or knocked out of the game against Georgia in the college football playoff semifinal, they probably win the national title. They probably boat race TCU just like Georgia did. And I think Marvin Harrison Jr. would be a big step. He stepped up for JSN. We saw what he was able to do. Like, there's probably nothing that I could say bad about the kid in terms of just where he's at. He's number 1, and I think it's a clear tier. It's him, and then after that, right? So we'll talk about scouting real quick, things he does well. We know the ball skills. Like, the ball skills are tremendous. Goes up and gets it, catch point, all those type of things, high point, gets up there 50-50 balls. Like, Marvin Harrison Jr. does that, and there's no one else that does it better. Size, you see it, 6'4", 205. He's able to kind of step up. He's that prototypical wide receiver that the NFL is going to love, but at the same time, he's got the skills of a smaller kind of wide receiver. And so what's the fun part about him is he's going to be a weapon. Like, they're going to use him all over. He's getting the best coaching from the wide receiver position from Brian Hartline, Ohio State. Like, and we've seen how Ohio State producers consistently in these receivers produce in the NFL. And for fantasy terms, they're top 24 wide receivers. So I don't think this needs to be difficult. Like, when you're thinking of like who's good, Ohio State wide receivers. And I think we keep it like that. Footwork off the line, very good. He gets pressed, he gets off of it very quick. He can get out in and out of his breaks. Like, there's pretty much no one that does it better than him in college football right now for his footwork. That obviously comes from his dad. His dad has some of the best footwork that we've ever seen. But we've seen this. Like, that's the pedigree, right? Now, if you're going to knock him for anything, I think elite speed has been getting thrown around there as question marks. Like, can he really take the top off the defense? I think he can. We've seen it at times, maybe not consistent enough, right? So when we're thinking of like consistency issues, but again, that stuff's going to get hashed out. I don't necessarily think he needs elite speed to be dominant, just like he's going to be in the NFL. Zone coverage is one thing that was brought up, that, hey, he does very good against man and press and those type of things. But when teams mix up zone coverage, it really confuses Ohio State offense, CJ Stroud and those guys. And he's got to get better at finding the zones, finding those open spaces, and then sitting and kind of, nuance basically in his game. And I think that's something that is highlighted. I think that is something to bring up. Like, hey, when you're looking at it from that perspective, like, that's something he's going to work on next year. But guess what? He's only going to be a junior next year. So he's going to have that. He's going to have that ability. Now, 2 areas that I want to kind of bring up and show you guys here for each one of these guys. So this first one is receiving yards per team pass attempt. So how many receiving yards do they get per team pass attempt, to show you how dominant they are out here. I know Peter Howard talks about this. Jarek Backus has it on his Campus Can site. Jarek is one of my favorite people in the space. You should go follow him. If you don't, you see his @ under there. When you're looking at what he does. So what I did is I wanted to compare him to guys that are kind of comparable in terms of maybe some player comps. So Garrett Wilson is up there, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson in terms of fantasy and just NFL production. That's elite company to be in. So you look at what Marvin Harrison Jr. is doing. It's elite. So you're talking about Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson as being top 2 dynasty wide receivers in fantasy. And then you have Garrett Wilson, who's probably a top 12, depending on who you ask. You're looking at elite category, right? Then you look at the weighted dominator rating of that same category. Again, you're seeing Marvin Harrison Jr. above Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. So when you're looking at both of these prospects and you're looking at these prospects overall, that's where we are coming from in terms of value of what you see here. And then also, on a side note, Garrett Wilson is completely undervalued, and this is why he was undervalued last year. And if you'd been following me, you wouldn't have fell into that trap of drafting Treylon Burks ahead of him. But whatever. All right, let's go to number 2. Emeka Ibuka, 6'1", 205. I moved Emeka up, and I think there's a tier here of like, okay, who are these guys? Where are they going to be? And I think Emeka's earned his spot. Like when you're looking at just production-wise and what he's been able to do, he has earned this spot. And so when you're looking at what he did, 13 games, 74 catches, 1,100 yards, 10 touchdowns, really stepped up in the absence of JSN as well. Really took over that slot position like we've seen Olave, like we've seen these guys do at that Ohio State area. And he's earned this spot. And when you're looking at all the metrics, like he looks extremely, extremely good, where he's rivaling Marvin Harrison, right? Now, scouting wise, good hands. I think he's got very solid hands when you're talking about just being able to catch the football, like going over the middle, doing these type of things. There are some contested catch issues, so you see that on weaknesses, but overall his hands, like his ability to kind of track the ball and his catch radius, those type of things, he does well. Balance, like you're never going to see him get hit off. Like when you're talking about just going over the middle and doing those type of things, like balance is there. Like he's very nuanced as a route runner. You'll see him there. He's versatile too. So there is some talk about him maybe being not just a slot guy anymore. He's kind of proven maybe he can get to the outside, and that's something that you like to see. Obviously, we're going to see that development going forward at the NFL level, those type of things, but maybe he could do that, right? So when we're thinking of like, where does he fit in as a receiver in this class, versatility is going to be one of those things. Now, as far as weaknesses go, they all kind of fit together. Like separation issues, there is that. Like a lot of people complain that Ohio State just schemes their guys open. Well, that's what they're supposed to do. But how does that separation stuff take over to that next level in the NFL, right? Press coverage. There are times where he can get hit off. Now, a lot of teams don't play press against Ohio State. There's a reason for that. They're extremely good against, scheming against that. And Marvin Harrison Jr., all those different guys. But when he does, there is times he gets hit off his route. And that's something to look at. And in contested catches, he struggles in 50-50 balls. Like he could do definitely ball tracking and those type of things. But the contested catches stuff is a real concern when you're looking at him as a prospect moving forward. But I do think that he's done enough, especially from the advanced metrics, to earn himself this 2 spot. Now, we're talking about receiving yards per team. I just added the same guys. So when we're looking at this, and I put Devonta Smith in there because I do think that there's some nuance with Devonta, thinking about where he could be. And we know Devonta, 4-year guy, and analytics didn't really like him very much. But when you're looking at just overall, I mean, he's right there, right? So if you're looking at there, he's right in there. And he played with Marvin Harrison Jr. So receiving yards per team pass attempt takes into account teammates. And you're looking at this, he was right there, right underneath Jamar, Justin Jefferson. Now let's look at dominator rating, which is, I think, something to look at. Ahead of Justin Jefferson. He scored just right behind Marvin Harrison Jr., obviously Jamar and Garrett up there, but ahead of Devonta Smith. Now, Devonta had a great senior year, as you can see, but, Emeka's in some rare categories. So when you're just looking at the advanced metrics, he's there. Like, he's right there. Now, number 3 is a kid that I think is going down boards a little bit, and that's Xavier Worthy from Texas. 13 games this year, 60 catches, 760 yards, 9 touchdowns. He had a phenomenal freshman year. Probably, I think it was one of the best analytical profiles of a freshman wide receiver. Travis May talked about that from Mojo, and he said, hey, this kid is really good. Then he stepped in and he struggled at Texas this year on a team that really needed him to kind of step up without really a wide receiver 2 on that roster, and he did not look good. Whether you think that's the quarterback issues with Quinn Ewers and that offensive system and whatever, but the numbers tell a different story in terms of just production. Wasn't efficient. You see it there. He has more of an explosive receiver his freshman year than he was his sophomore year. Like, there's an issue going on, and I think the size thing is also the concern, right? So we're looking at scouting. I think the strengths is always going to be Yak, like especially his freshman year. So we saw that. We see that yards after catchability, goes and gets it in, and you go watch the Oklahoma game from 2 years ago. Like, he's special in that regard, right? Footwork, he has great. The whip routes that he does, like all that kind of stuff, like legitimately great footwork. Like, he's fun to watch on tape. He gets guys moving. He manipulates defenders' hips. Like, I love that shit about Xavier Worthy. Like, that's super fun. As a film guy, he's one of my favorite prospects just to watch. And I literally laugh every time I see him just make a defender fall. Like, he's the footwork route runner type of guy. Explosiveness, obviously. He's got the speed. He's got that, all of that. But the size is a concern. Like, you're looking at where he's listed at, like 165, and he hasn't gone bigger. So, when we're looking at wide receivers in that mark, I have Jay Stein on all the time, and we talk about it. Like, there is a certain metric we want to hit with alpha wide receivers. And even, when you're looking at like other guys that have hit that threshold, that's an issue. Like, that's going to be an issue. And so Devonta Smith's going to be the comp, but Devonta was a little bigger and he had more of a production rise, right? Devonta was a legitimate, Heisman winner, like legitimate guy. So that's an issue. Drops, like he did have some drops this year, inconsistent hands, like, and I think it was more of like his frustration of not getting involved in the offense more. That's a problem. And an inconsistent production, like, you see it. He should have doubled. He should have hit that 1,000 yards mark. He should have went in there. I know he's a little banged up this year, and he had that, but I think there was some inconsistent holes in his profile, and I think that's something to be concerned about with Xavier. Now, when we're looking at receiving yards per team pass attempt, I tried to put some guys in here that maybe he could be, comp to a little bit. Brandon Cooks is over there. DJ Moore. Remember, these are college, college where they at in college and all that stuff. Devonta's another one. Like, just trying to figure out where these guys are. And Xavier, he hit that threshold the first year. And then you see that inconsistency the second year on a team that really, really needs his help. And when you're looking at the next year going forward, Texas has some guys coming in. They got some dudes at wide receiver from the freshman, and Naor be back. Like, there's some question marks about what Xavier's going to hit. Will he hit that average, that line for receiving yards per pass attempt? Is he going to hit that threshold or not? Then you look at weighted dominator rating on this. And again, he does hit in that middle. So he does hit the dominator rating. We saw his first year. That's why it was so impressive. Now, with his third year, I think that's the question going forward where he's at. And I really feel like 3 is the perfect spot for him in terms of the rankings. Now, number 4, we're going to go to Troy Franklin from Oregon. This might be a hot take for some people because they know how much I love Troy. He stepped up this year. He needed to step up, and he did. 61 catches, 891 yards, and 9 touchdowns. I still like this kid, 6'3", 178. I watched him play in high school. I've seen his passion at Oregon, what he's done. I see his passion in high school. He's going to step in there with Bo Nix next year again, and he should hit that 1,000-yard mark. But I think consensus-wise, 4 is pretty good. I think 4 is where he should be, 4 or 5, depending on where you at, depending on what you think of Ja'Cory Brooks here in a minute. But overall, I think that's fair. Now, scouting-wise for Troy, strengths, yak. He's got that. You'll see that in the tape. And he has big games. And I do think, when you're looking at the area of he steps up, deep threat, gets out there and goes. You saw in the big games that they played this year against UCLA, when he gets separation and he's able to kind of be that deep threat guy, they hit it to him. He's a big play threat. And when you watch his tape in high school, he's the same thing. Big play receiver, kick return, punt return, all of that stuff. Route running, I think he's very nuanced, gets separation. I think he can go do that. And he goes up and gets there's route running that's very good. Even when he doesn't create separation that he needs, he's still able to go up and get it, and he does just enough. He also manipulates defenders at catch point. You'll see that ability, and he thinks the game. There's a lot of things that I love about Troy's overall profile. Now, his weaknesses, I think size comes into question. He's a big guy, 6'3", but he's only 178. So we're thinking of Marvin Harrison Jr. He's 6'4", 205. He's put on that size and that weight. I don't know if Franklin's frame's ever going to let him do that. So there's going to be some interesting comps for him that we see out there. Then you're looking at speed. He's a deep threat, but that really comes from his defenses in different ways, his route running, nuance, and understanding of the game. I don't know if he has that elite speed. It's good, but I don't know if it's elite. And in hands, there's questionable drops on his tape. So, hey, that's something to highlight and pinpoint. That's something that he's got to do better moving forward. Now, when you're looking at just the metrics, receiving yards per team pass attempt, hey, I like to put some other guys in here. He gets comped to Marquise Lee a lot, just so to show you kind of where he was at in college. Jerry Jeudy's on here, Alan Lazard. So when you're looking at this, I think this is what worries people about his ADP and worries people about him as a prospect. I know that other people talk about this. He talks about worrying about him as a prospect. And I get it based on these kind of comps and what you see, just in terms of receiving yards per pass step, and then even the dominator rating, right? So when we see the dominator rating here, same thing. He falls behind Jerry Jeudy. He falls behind Alan Lazard. He falls behind Lee. So I think that is where the question mark, I understand the concerns with him, but if you have him in Devy or whatever, you're not going to be able to trade him for the value because people know this already. So you got to hope for that breakout, and maybe he gets a little bit of buzz and he get that first round draft capital. And if you want to move him, then that's when you move him. Now, number 5 is my sleeper, and number 5 is the kid that I think everybody should be drafting right now, Malik Neighbors. And I know that he's got a little bit of a yard mark this year, 1,000 yards, 3 touchdowns, what he's able to do. I think Malik, he was the best LSU wide receiver, better than Keyshawn Boutte this year. He was the best LSU wide receiver on that roster this season, and he's not getting valued like this right now. He is undervalued in Devy circles, and with just in terms of just value-wise, right? So when we're thinking of what Malik was able to do this season, you have to love what Malik was able to do. And going forward, I think he's going to be the wide receiver on LSU's roster. I've seen him go in the 4th or 5th round of drafts. He's a must draft for me. Scouting wise, athleticism is there. A SOB. When you're watching him play, if you're one of those dudes that love hey, I love these guys that come in and just got that dog in them, right? I'm gonna go old school young guy right here. He's got that. Off the line, you are not press coverage him. You're not getting in his grill. He's gonna take you off just by sheer will and athleticism. And it may not be nuanced. It might not be as perfect as it needs to be, right? But he's gonna go and go get it. He's gonna go put that person. So when we think of guys that changes, like Brandon Ennis coming in from Ohio State, I just mentioned him. I talked about him recently. Guys like that separate themselves because they are dudes and get to that challenge, right? Think of Xavier. He's not going to do that. I think of Troy Franklin. I think that's one of the things that we concerned about. Not Neighbors. Neighbors going to go up and get that. Now, his weaknesses, I think, is highlighted from just his tape. He was not very, he didn't have a ton of reps in high school, not against really good competition. So he's really learned how to do route running, pushed off routes at times. Now, he's tough and he's athletic and he loves press coverage, but sometimes he lets that kind of get ahead of him and he can get kind of pushed off his routes, which is not good for a guy like Jaden Daniels, who really needs guys to be there, be on their steps and all that. So route running, pushed off routes, those type of things that you need to know about Neighbors. But I think he's a smashing value right now. So when you look at this, I wanted to compare him to all the LSU wide receivers for some fun here. So when you're looking at Neighbors, look at Kayshawn. Look at Kayshawn right there. That is scary in terms of what he's been able to produce. Obviously, Kayshawn was hurt his sophomore year, but this year he was not. But if you look at Neighbors, he's right underneath Justin Jefferson, y'all, in that receiving yards per team pass attempt. Neighbors is a value based on every metric and everything that we've seen. Again, he hit the threshold again for weighted dominator rating, and I think he's going to hit that threshold again this next year's junior year, and I think he's going to hit over the Justin Jefferson weighted dominator rating next year for LSU. And that is a guy. On a last part of this, then we'll get you out of here. On the radar prospects, some of these guys are out there. So when we're thinking of Ja'Cory Brooks, where does he fit? Mario Williams, where does he fit? Ja'Cory's one of those ones that's interesting for me. I think he's valued a little higher than I like to value. I think the question mark I have with Ja'Cory is that Alabama needed wide receiver help this year. They were dying for good wide receivers, and Ja'Cory didn't step up. I think he did okay. He had some average games, but he didn't step up, and I think that's a big red flag for me, just in all honesty. I like Ja'Cory, but I think that's a red flag that he could not step up in that room that was dying for prospects, right? Mario Williams, USC, what's he going to be next year? With Collins, I wish he would transfer. I don't know why he hasn't transferred yet, but he's going to stick at Clemson. Maybe him and Klubnik have a good year together, so be on the lookout for that. JoJo Earl has not produced what we wanted to see, kind of banged up, not had to roll at Alabama, but going to TCU, I think that's a number to watch. Michael Studevant has not declared where he's going to go yet. He's in the transfer portal from Cal. That's a name to watch. I love Michael Studevant. He's a stud. Watch him. Wherever he goes, he's going to shoot up boards, because if he goes to a place like Tennessee or someone that really needs him, that's big. And then Jacob Cowan. He went back to school at Arizona. I wish he would have came out this year, but that's always a guy to kind of keep on your prospects. And in case Pray there going to Maryland, some guy to watch. There's little guys out there that are kind of Keon Coleman, Michigan State, what can they be? So those are the guys that kind of watch moving forward. And then Andrew Anthony, he's in the transfer portal from Michigan, going there. So I appreciate you guys tuning in. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope this kind of helps you guys idea where the 24 class is with the wide receiver, where their value is at. If you liked it, please hit that like and subscribe button. Let us know what you think in the comments. Let us know what you think about this wide receiver class. Marvin Harrison Jr., do you believe he's a top 10 pick? Where do you have Xavier Worthy, right? So appreciate you guys. I will check you guys on the next video.